People's Socialist Party. I'm leader of the Uhuru Movement and the International African Revolution. Today, our topic is Trump, Biden, Breonna, no debate. And this, of course, is in response to what was supposed to pass as a debate that just happened on last night between, excuse me, this charade that just happened between Joe Biden, a former vice president of the United States, and Donald Trump. And excuse me, comrades. On today, what most people are talking about is what they call the chaos that was supposed to be the debate. They are talking about how it was wild and unruly and how Trump used it to bully Biden. And part of what he was doing, they said, through that method was to show that Biden is too old, too feeble, and cannot respond effectively to with the kind of strength that's required of by the US president. This is really interesting because what we have is these two rich white geriatrics talking about who's toughest with the assumption of one is tough and the other's not tough and the other can be intimidating, one can't. And for what we know, and when I say we, I'm talking about African peoples in general, African people at large recognize that neither of these rich white guys would dare go to the Black community after dark. You wouldn't catch them in North St. Louis. You wouldn't catch them in places like the Fifth Ward in Houston, Texas. You wouldn't catch them in Folkville and Everton West in the township of South Africa, not by themselves. They wouldn't dare come there. So there's no, this thing about their toughness. We know that each of them is tough to the extent that they have access to the Polaris missiles that can be fired and kill people from long distances. But they're tough because they have access to Apache helicopters that massacre poor people in various places around the world. There's nothing tough about them. We know that. So this is a charade, and the entire debate is a charade, was a charade. And I just want to say something about that because I think it's extremely important. Because the debate is something that's used to try and rally the enthusiasm of people inside the United States for a failing system, trying to work them into some frenzy of a patriotic democratic participation at a time where so many people in the United States have clearly concluded that the United States government and its institutions cannot speak to their interests, driving some people to what would be characterized as extremes and trying to express their own aspirations outside of the system, et cetera. So the objective and part of the so-called debate is to win as many people as possible into a discussion that limits and circumscribes how we understand what the real deal is, what is real, what should be involved in determining the trajectory of human history and the history of our people in this country and around the world. It's like in the starting point, you know, you say it's a charade. It has no real significance outside of allowing two sectors of the white ruling class to argue among themselves about who is most capable, which is most capable of controlling and running the country in the interest of white power, in the interest of colonial capitalism. That's what it's about. You can't call this a debate when they have already predetermined, first of all, what's going to be talked about. They said this is supposed to be a 6 to 15 minute, 15-minute segments. I was supposed to talk about Trump and Biden's records, supposed to talk about the Supreme Court. And I just want to say something about the Supreme Court, because again, you can't talk about the Supreme Court without talking about this woman, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has become the iconic figure for white power, and certainly for liberal white power, for truth, morality, justice of the United States, in the United States. And the truth, of course, is far different from that in terms of who Ruth Ginsburg is, and in terms of how the system works to eliminate anyone who would be actually involved in speaking about justice for women, rights for women, justice for and rights of the oppressed within the legal system itself. I mean, how in the hell can we have our discussion about justice and women's rights and freedom circumscribed to the extent that this system, this white power system, would have the audacity to talk about the rights of women without saying Assata Shakur? Ruth Bader Ginsburg is no Assata Shakur. She is no Ella Baker. She is no Fannie Lou Hamer. She is none of those folk who actually stood up and fought for the rights of African people. As women, they did this. In the forefront, risked their lives. Ruth Bader Ginsburg risked nothing. She came from privileged circumstances, and she was the law clerk of what the white people would refer to as a proto-fascist Scalia. And so the actual thing is that when you talk about the Supreme Court and Ruth Ginsburg, this is what the debate was about. But that debate did not contain this discussion. It did not talk about how can you talk about that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is no Lynn Stewart. If you want to talk about white women who tried to use the law within the context of the system itself in the interest of the oppressed, then look at Lynn Stewart, who this government locked up, put in prison, and despite the fact that she was suffering from terminal breast cancer, they kept her locked up and used the prison system as a means by which they would execute her. So don't talk to us about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. These people were not involved in the debate. That's why we say when we talk about these forces, Trump and Biden, and then we say Breonna, there's no debate here, because they've already cleared the field so that the only ones talking is them. And they're just talking to themselves. That's no debate. When you get in a discussion with yourself, you're not debating unless you was schizoid. You got some form of schizophrenia, and perhaps that's what we're looking at. A form of political schizophrenia where sectors of the ruling class are talking to themselves over the heads of the mass of the people, even though they call your name when they do it. So they were going to talk about the Supreme Court. The debate was supposed to deal with COVID-19. And then it's not dealing with COVID-19. I don't give a damn what they said, because if you don't say COVID-19, that's killing at least twice as many African people in the United States as white people. If you don't say that this is a colonial virus, then you're not having a debate. This is, again, sectors of the ruling class talking to themselves. And then why would they be interested in a virus that's sweeping a pandemic as they characterize it? Because the pandemic can also get them. And so they would try to say some way how you can affect it, change it, control it, but they are not going to be in the places. They're not going to be on the public transportation with us. They're not going to be riding on the buses. They're not going to be in the subways facing the same risks that we face. They're not going to be the workers who are out there trying to fight the fires and who are out there trying to take care of people who are ill. So their chances of contracting COVID-19 is much slimmer. So despite the fact they say that this is a part of the debate discussion, it wasn't. And so they were going to talk about the economy. They were going to talk about race and violence in the United States. And then they were going to talk about the integrity of the election. So this is what they've already predetermined what the discussion is going to be. And in so doing, they predetermined what it's not going to be, what it's not going to be about. And even when they talk about issues like the economy, even when they talk about race and violence, even when they talk about the integrity of the elections, they do it in a fashion that does not address the issues of African people and what's happening to us and what has been happening to us historically. So this is not a debate. This is not a debate. It was a one-sided discussion. The bourgeoisie talking to itself, the white ruling class engaged in this discussion, this debate among themselves. It's like if you look at what's happening in California, Oregon, Washington, this state, where massive fires are sweeping those states, burning millions and millions of acres of land. And then if you know that this is being done by arsonists, that you know this is arson that's doing this, and then you say, well, we're going to have a debate on the best method of controlling or containing fires, and the debate is going to be between arsonists. They can come up, I'm sure, with some clever discussion about among themselves about fighting fires, but they damn sure are not going to say the way we fight fires is destroy arson, is to get rid of the arsonists, except they're not going to do that. And that's what you're looking at comparatively when you look at the kind of thing that they call a debate. And you can't call it a debate. So what they say mostly is that this was a contest where they're talking over each other, and this was helpful because it should be clarifying that this has nothing to do with the masses of the people. It's about sectors of the ruling class as personified by these two geriatric rich white men who stood up and then spoke across each other about issues that were significant to them, but had no meaningful relationship to the masses of people in this country and around the world. And this whole issue of debate, again, is really important to the ruling class because it suggests to the people that you have an opportunity to make this determination. The fact of the matter is, even going into the election, more than 1 million people had already voted. And then the fact of the matter is that the polling that they had done showed that only 6% of the people who were watching the debate were undecided about who they were going to vote for. So you had this performance that was done to persuade 6% of the vote at best. And this is what you see when you're looking at Trump and Biden. But even as this debate is cranking up, even as they're talking about it, trying to win people to participate in the debate, the other thing that's happening, of course, is that the Breonna Taylor fiasco is still looming large over the country, looming large over the ruling class in terms of what it has to contend with, looming large over the reality that what African people are confronted with in this country and around the world is colonial domination by a foreign and alien power. So here you have, we discover that the Attorney General, the Negro Attorney General of Kentucky, did not even tell the people who were supposed to be in the grand jury that they had a choice of what kind of charges they could file against the cops who murdered this child, who murdered 26-year-old Breonna Taylor, just an African working class woman, like so many other African working class women. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was never going to be in the situation that Breonna Taylor was in. She never was going to have to face that kind of terror. None of that was on the agenda. None of that was being debated. Nothing that even spoke to that was being addressed. And so here you have a situation where it's revealed that this wonderful guy who they hold up as the darling of the new Republican Party, this African who didn't even, and he's an African, who didn't even tell the grand jurors that they could have actually indicted the cops for murder. Didn't even give them the option of doing that. And very glibly stood before millions of people around the world and in this country to explain how this system works and how it spoke to the interest of the people in Kentucky. It was based on the law. It was such a righteous kind of thing, revealing once again, of course, that the whole system works against African people. From the position that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did occupy, from the position of the new white woman they're going to put there will occupy, from the position of even something like an attorney general and a local prosecutor who would pull together a grand jury. It all works for the same thing and against African people and oppressed peoples of the world. And generally speaking, it works against the working people in this country. But that was not debated. That was never going to be debated. So here you have this tame performance that we see pundits characterizing as chaotic and showing how Trump has no respect for the system, and he is just there to bully Biden. And of course, Biden with his new face, standing before the people, he's the one who is to be calm and reasonable. And there were some interesting aspects of this thing, because when Trump is talking about, when Biden is talking about how, because what they've done is there's this thing that's come to be known as the October surprise in presidential election, where the election happening in November, and then October before the election, there's this surprise thing that's put out by one of the other candidate that's supposed to be disadvantaged to his opponent, and it's supposed to raise the greater likelihood of one winning against the other. This surprise they throw in the mix at the last minute, so that the assumption here is there's not enough time for the opponent to gather resources and a response to this surprise. And so in this instance, of course, the October surprise was not done directly from the Biden camp. It was done by another sector. It was done by a sector of the bourgeoisie that's pushing Biden forward as the appropriate person to represent white power in this country and around the world. And this surprise was that Donald Trump, over the last 15 years or so, has only 2 years, that's 2016 and 17, paid something like $700 and some odd dollars in income taxes. And that for something like 15 years, I think it said, he paid no taxes at all. And so this was the great surprise that was thrust there, and that was supposed to make a difference. And hopefully from their perspective, will make a difference. And people say, wow, Trump paid no taxes or little taxes, and some of us paid more taxes than Trump did, and therefore I'm not going to vote for Trump. That's the logic behind that. But of course, even that is disingenuous, because the fact is that the bourgeoisie as a whole does not pay taxes. They don't pay taxes. That the rich guys don't pay taxes equal to the amount of resources that they extract from the people. They don't pay taxes. They pay very few taxes, very little taxes. And then when Biden, when this got suggested, because Biden was too timid to even make an assault on that in an effective way, and it had to be done by this other person who was supposed to be moderating the debate, as they call it, pushed Trump on it, and Biden said, well, show us your tax records or something. And in fact, Trump said, well, you wrote the law that created the loopholes that I use. And the fact is that Biden and the other senators, Democrats and Republicans, participate in this charade so that the bourgeoisie, the rulers, don't have to pay anything. In fact, the entire social system is run of resources coming primarily from working people in this country and around the world. That's how it is, what taxes are. Taxes extract that value. Where do taxes come from? And this is important too, because one of the items they were talking about is the whole question of COVID-19 and healthcare, et cetera. And there's this line that's out there among the rulers and the political pundits, and even some working class people, unaware of the significance of it, that somehow the government, when it gives people healthcare, that is free healthcare. And that somehow these are freeloaders and the government is taking care of them, when the reality is that all the taxes that's paid come from the working people in this country and around the world. This is value that's extracted against our will. I don't mean that they take this amount of money from us in the form of taxes. I'm talking about, they call it surplus value. Surplus, what is surplus value? Surplus value is that amount of money that goes into the pockets, the coffers of the ruling class, above and beyond what they paid for, what they invested in production. The rest of the value that is accrued comes from the labor and the stolen resources of African people, working people here and around the world. So all the value that's paid, when Trump paid his taxes, the $750, that was your money. that he used to pay the taxes with. This is what they call surplus value. This is what they call profit in the colonial capitalist system. That was your money that he used. Then you got to pay taxes on that as well. And then they tell you that if you say, I have to have free healthcare, which is not free at all because you're paying for it with your taxes. This is they use your tax money to put more cops in the streets that would kill you, kill our people, that would put more prisons, more jails available for us, that would put more Apache helicopters, that would murder people in Palestine and oppress peoples all around the world. They make nuclear weapons, drones, and all of that with your taxpayers' money. This is surplus value that they took from you. And then they tell you, even though I can take your money and buy guns and buy drones and buy submarines and buy nuclear weapons to control and scare and dominate the rest of the world, your money can't go for your health care. And I will use your money to make sure that everybody in the Congress has free health care. I will use your money to make sure the president has free health care. I will use your money to make sure that these persons who occupy that office, even after they leave office, have permanent security, personal guards to protect them. This is how this thing works. So nothing on there was on the up and up. No matter how they characterize it, there was nothing legitimate about what they called a debate because the issues really weren't being discussed. So what we're saying is that it's just like white power does things. They attack a tiny country or helpless country like Iraq after they've starved it for several years and what have you, and it's helpless, and they attack it. And they murder no more than 1 million people, and children and older people being a dominant part of the victims of this, and they call it a war. That's no war. This was no debate. It's no debate because you eliminate anybody who could be involved in a discussion against what you're talking about. What would have been a debate? A debate would have included the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party against what they're talking about. A debate would have been something that would have included even the Poor People's Campaign that was being promoted by Martin Luther King when the government murdered him. A debate would have been something that would have included the demands that were coming from the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. Let them debate against that. They can't, because what happened in the 1960s is that the Black Revolution had defeated, ideologically and politically, had defeated US imperialism, politically and ideologically. And what it did was resort at that point to guns, to killing people so that they could knock us out of the debate. So Malcolm is not a part of the debate. King is not a part of the debate. The Black Panther Party is not a part of the debate any longer, but the African People's Socialist Party is. We are part of that debate. And we're saying that in addition to the National Black Political Agenda for Self-Determination, that we helped to put together from the coalition that we helped to build, because we recognize that the debate had to be completed. That's why we say you killed all those people, but Black is back, and we are back. And we will not be satisfied with some sham performance by Trump and Biden that's supported by all of the rulers in this country, that's supported by all of the media in this country, the same media that, by the way, and you should be aware of it, it's not just the television media, it's not just the news media, it's also Facebook. You know what I'm talking about because they cut you off. It's a part of the same apparatus that speaks primarily to the interests of the rulers in this country of white power. So here's what we say. Let's add this to the debate. We have a 14-point program in the African People's Socialist Party. We say we want peace, dignity, and the right to build a prosperous life through our own labor and in our own interest. That didn't talk about that. We want the right to economic development and creative and productive employment, which promote the needs and well-being of our entire people. 3, we want an end to all local, state, federal, and other taxation of Black people by the US government and any of its agencies. They want to talk about taxes. We talk about, we refuse to have you to continue to use our tax dollars to hire cops who shoot us down in the streets, to provide prisons that keep us locked up forever massively under colonial domination. We want the right to free speech and political association, a guarantee of the right to work for the betterment and emancipation of Black people without fear of political imprisonment and the loss of life, limb, and livelihood. We want the right to international political and economic association with Africans and other peoples anywhere on the face of the earth. And this is a really important demand, because as you know, what the United States government has done is come up with a list of names of different groups that you can't have anything to do with it, because in the 1960s, the power of the international movement was that we could show support to each other around the world. So what they've done now is they declared certain groups, certain countries as terrorist organizations. General Alexander Haig under Ronald Wilson Reagan, who was then the Attorney General, not the Attorney General, but played a prominent role in the Reagan administration, came up with this concept that henceforth that people who were known as freedom fighters will be characterized as terrorists under this regime, and it has continued up to now. This is the same Ronald Reagan that Barack Hussein Obama showed so much, expressed so much admiration for. So we say we want to be able to have an association because Cuba was able to open up its doors to African revolution. And now they characterize Cuba in a way that you can't even go to Cuba. You can't even communicate well with Cuba. It was Cuba that took Robert Williams in when in 1954, 1950s, 57, he was chased out of this country by Klansperson. And the United States government was going to lock him up forever. And it was Cuba that allowed him to set up Radio Free Dixon on its territory so that he could communicate with Africans and other people in this country and could get around the media that's propping up this whole system inside this country. We want the immediate and unconditional release of all Black people who are presently locked down in US prisons. We want complete amnesty for all African political prisoners and prisoners of war from US prisons, or their immediate release to any friendly country which will accept them and give them political asylum. We want the immediate withdrawal of the US police from our oppressed and exploited communities. We want an end to the political and social oppression and economic exploitation of African women. We want the right to build an African People's Liberation Army. We want the US and the international peoples and international European ruling class and states to pay African people for the centuries of genocide, oppression, and enslavement of our people. We want an end to the vicious, self-serving US and Western European political, economic, and military interference in the affairs of Africa and African people throughout the world. Talk about AFRICOM. We want an end to US colonial domination of African people within the US. This is important. We believe that the primary struggle of African people within the US during this period is to throw off the alien US colonial domination, which is responsible for virtually every hardship imposed on Black people by this government that is identified as a so-called Black problem. We believe that our problems with education, from our inability to control our own schools and determine the education of our own children, to the inferior and racist quality of the education we do receive, are caused by colonialism. We believe that our problem with healthcare, from the absence of Black controlled and operated health clinics and institutions throughout our communities, to the hazardous health conditions imposed on us by poverty and callous government decisions, are caused by colonialism. We believe that our problems with housing, from the unavailability of decent and inadequate housing for the majority of our people, to the dilapidated and vermin-infested housing we are forced to live in, are caused by colonialism. We believe that our problems with food and clothing, from the terrible quality and quantity which are imposed on us by blood-sucking merchants, to our inability to produce and distribute them for and among ourselves, are caused by colonialism, where our whole people is dominated and oppressed by a foreign, alien state power for the purpose of economic exploitation and political advantage. And 14, we want the total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government. This is the program. They didn't talk about anything like this, and the only reason they were able to have that discussion without any significant reference to the rest of us and the rest of the world is because they'd killed us, or they had arrested us and taken us out of the discussion at all. So we are making this call to you. I'm making this call to you now, that we can have a real debate. I'm not saying how you are going to vote, whether you will vote for Biden or whether you will vote for Trump or anything like that. But what I am saying is that we have to make sure, we have to determine that there's going to be a real debate among ourselves and for ourselves and with peoples around the world and people inside this country of what is best for Africa, what is best for Black people, what is best for the oppressed here, what is best for the working people inside this country and around the world. We have to make that debate happen. That's our responsibility. That's my responsibility as a revolutionary, especially during these times when there's so much spontaneous struggle that's happening among all the people. We have to begin to provide revolutionary leadership for this, so the African working class can assume this responsibility to lead us beyond this bourgeois democratic response to our situation and initiate a revolutionary democratic response to what's happening to us. How do you do that? Quickly, what I'm calling on you to do is join with us, join with the African People's Socialist Party, and join with the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, where we are going to continue this debate. And so 4 days after the election is supposed to be over, we're going to be in Washington, D.C. with a massive mobilization. African people, our friends should be there. And we will say that the terms of the debate will be quite different, and that the title and theme of the debate will be quite different. And the theme of this will be Black Power Matters, Down with Colonialism, Black Community Control of the Police. So come out with us. November 6th, 7th, and 8th, but 7th is the time of the big rally that we're going to have at Malcolm X Park. We're going to march on the White House. We're going to have another rally across the street from Malcolm X Park. And then we're going to have a Zoom conference the following day where we'll discuss these issues, these matters that should shape and define what the future looks like for Africans, for other colonized people and the oppressed peoples of the world. Go to blackisbackcoalition.org. Go to apspuhuru.org, apspuhuru.org. Let's make the debate happen that they have determined should not happen by this government, and exposed by our presence in November in this mobilization. That expose how the whole system is rigged, and it was a rigged debate that does not speak to the interests of Africans and the oppressed anywhere in this country and around the world. Uhuru.